Ever feel like you're just swimming in information? Like there's so much data out there. But finding what's genuinely useful, what you can actually act on, feels almost impossible. That's really why we do these deep dives. We try to cut through all that noise, look closely at the sources, and just pull out the key insights, so you can get up to speed quickly. So today, we're digging into a really pressing urban challenge, urban pluvial flooding. Now, maybe you think of flooding, and you picture rivers breaking their banks, right? But this is different. It's often called an invisible hazard. It's when an extreme rainfall event just completely overwhelms a city's drainage systems. It tends to be very localized, sudden, really hard to predict. And it can cause chaos, flooding streets, damaging property. And the intended solution for this kind of problem, usually it involves what we call climate services. These are tools and information sources designed to give decision makers, like urban planners, water managers, even you, as a citizen, the guidance they need to adapt.
Right. And that's exactly where the core problem lies. Because in theory, these climate services should provide everything needed. But in practice, they often aren't seen as truly usable. They can sometimes even get in the way of the decisions they're supposed to help. The research calls these usability gaps.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. Let's unpack these usability gaps. And maybe more importantly, understand the surprising sort of hidden contextual factors that create them. We're basing this on a really thorough systematic literature review. It was published in Wiley Interdisciplinary Reviews, Water, by Kooters, Rayfrost, Van der Waal, Ellen, and Mydring. It's a great look at why good ideas don't always lead to useful tools. Okay, let's get into it. This invisible hazard, urban pluvial flooding. Like you said, it's not just heavy rain falling, it's about the city's capacity being exceeded, leading to water ponding up or flowing over land where it shouldn't. And the governance side sounds messy too. It's not just one agency's problem, is it?
Not at all. It's really complex. You've got local governments responsible for, say, public drainage, but then you also have private property owners, regular people, businesses who are often expected or even required to take their own steps to reduce flood risk on their land. It's a very interconnected web of responsibility.
And into this web come the climate services. Ideally, what are they supposed to do?
Ideally, they should provide relevant, credible, and accessible information. That's the goal. They're meant to take complex climate data and transform it into something customized. Think maps, future projections, things that actually help all those different stakeholders make informed decisions and, importantly, build trust in the information.
Okay, so that's the ideal. But these usability gaps, how do they actually manifest? What does that look like in practice?
Well, it's fundamentally a mismatch. A classic example is maybe a user just doesn't have the specific map reading skills needed to really understand a sophisticated flood map. The map might be technically brilliant, but if the user can't interpret it correctly, well, it's not usable for them.
Right. Or maybe the information is understandable, but it just doesn't quite hit the mark.
Exactly. It might not fully meet a user's very specific information needs for the particular decision they're trying to make. There's a disconnect.
So it's about the interaction, not just the content. And the review points to a central cause, often missed.
Yes, what they term contextual factors. And these aren't just small things. They can be major roadblocks. Think about a perfectly designed climate service tool. If it doesn't slot easily into how an organization already works, its existing processes.
It creates friction.
Right. Or if it clashes with the broader societal culture around technology or data. We also see basic technical stuff. Does it need specific hardware? Are there software bugs?
Right.
Even things like a user's personal expectations or bigger societal issues like, the politicization of climate change can undermine usability. It just shows that providing really accurate, detailed climate info is, well, it's necessary, but it's often not sufficient on its own.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because usability itself, it's kind of a slippery concept, isn't it? The review says there's no single definition everyone agrees on.
That's absolutely right. It is fuzzy, as the review puts it. They offer a broad definition, something like, the ability of users to interact with climate services and use them to achieve their purpose in a way that is satisfactory for the user.
Okay, so basically, does it work for the person using it, for their goal, and are they happy with how it works?
Pretty much. That's the core idea. But to really get a handle on it, the review makes this really important distinction. It's between the dimensions of usability and how those dimensions are operationalized.
Dimensions versus operationalization. What's the difference there?
So dimensions are the general ways authors describe the interaction. Think words like interactivity or relevance. Operationalization is how they actually measure or detail that dimension. So for interactivity, operationalization might mean looking at specific features like, can you zoom in on the map? Can you add your own data layers?
I see. So one is the concept, the other is the concrete implementation or measurement.
Exactly. And the key finding here was that authors often mentioned dimensions.
Like saying a tool is user-friendly.
Right. Or that it's relevant for climate change adaptation.
Yeah.
But then they don't always explain what they mean by that in concrete terms. They don't fully operationalize it.
Which makes it hard to compare studies or really know what worked and what didn't.
Precisely. It creates ambiguity.
So, despite this fuzziness, did the review manage to group these usability dimensions into some recurring themes?
Yes, thankfully. They pulled out 6 main categories that kept showing up in the literature. First, there's functionality. Basically, what can the service do? Does it help facilitate tasks? Is it interactive? Does it offer support?
Okay, the basic capabilities.
Second, ease of use. How simple is it to operate? Things like accessibility, understandability fall in here.
Makes sense.
Third, reducing time and effort. Is it efficient? Does it automate things? Make tasks quicker? Fourth, reliability. Can you trust the output? This is about accuracy, credibility, transparency.
Crucial for climate data.
Absolutely. Fifth, matching user needs. How well does it actually fit what the user requires? Is it applicable, relevant, tailored?
Right, that mismatch point again.
And finally, a category just called Other. This catches broader aspects like, is it right for the intended audience? What about the overall design?
Okay, 6 categories. Now, you mentioned earlier that these usability dimensions and how they're perceived are heavily influenced by those contextual factors. Can you remind us what those are again?
Yeah, so contextual factors are influences coming from outside the direct user-tool interaction. The review groups them into 3 levels. The broader context, think society, policy, that's the macro level. Then the organization where the service is being developed or used, that's the meso level. And finally, factors related to the individual developer or user, that's the micro level.
Macro, meso, micro, got it. And the study found these influences weren't equal.
Not at all. The standout finding was the dominance of the meso level, the organizational context. It accounted for something like 69% of the contextual factors mentioned during the design phase of these services.
Wow, almost 70%, even before it's being used.
Yes. And it was still the most significant during the use phase, accounting for 53% of factors. It really highlights the importance of what's happening within and between organizations.
Okay, let's unpack that meso level during design. What are some concrete examples?
Sure. During design, you see process factors. Things like, was there good stakeholder involvement? Actually talking to the people who will use the tool while building it. That improves effectiveness. Basic project constraints like time and budget also fit here.
Right, practical realities.
Then organizational factors, like does the organization's culture encourage trying new tools? One study mentioned making a tool more applicable by designing it to follow existing decision processes, like those used in spatial planning. So it fits in naturally.
Smart, integrating it.
And a huge one is data availability at that organizational or local level. If good local data isn't there, the service can't be as detailed or reliable as users might need.
That makes a lot of sense, especially the idea of fitting it into existing workflows. What about during the use phase? How does the meso level exert influence then?
It continues to be really critical. Organizational factors like how much accountability does a user feel within their organization? That affects whether they act on the information.
So it's not just can they use it, but will they, given their role?
Exactly. Or simple things like an organization providing open access data but failing to communicate when it gets updated. That makes the service relying on it less useful. Even the specific division of responsibilities in stormwater planning practices can limit how a tool gets used practically. And process factors are still relevant too. The project settings around how a tool is introduced or used in planning matter. One study noted that better alignment between a workshop's goals and the overall project schedule could have given a tool a much better chance to actually influence the planning outcomes.
So the organizational environment is just crucial. What about the micro level, the individual user? That accounted for 10% during design, but jumped to 28% during use.
Yeah, the individual impact becomes much more apparent once people are actually trying to use the service. And what's really striking here is the strong connection found between an individual skill level and the whole ease of use dimension.
So does the user actually have the technical skills or the map reading ability we mentioned earlier?
Precisely. Can they understand what's shown? Can they interact with the features properly? It has to match the intended user group's capabilities. Personal factors also heavily influence reliability. Things like trust and credibility often come down to an individual's intrinsic feeling about the service.
Right. Gut feelings matter.
They do, and they hugely impact whether the service matches user needs, often based on personal expectations. There was this compelling example where data showed a relatively low risk from climate change, and participants in a focus group basically said, well, this average data isn't sufficiently interesting or scary to evoke a reaction.
Wow. So even if the data is scientifically sound, if it doesn't feel urgent or compelling to that person, it fails the usability test for them.
Exactly. It wasn't usable in the sense of motivating action.
Okay, fascinating.
Mm.
And finally, the macro level. The big picture stuff like national policy, culture, was it 21% during design, 19% during use? What kinds of things fall here?
Well, you see things like data availability on a macro level, national data sets, for instance. One study pointed out how the availability of certain types of flood risk maps vary significantly between different Nordic countries. That obviously impacts what a service can reliably offer across borders.
National infrastructure, basically.
Right. Then sociocultural contextual factors. These can affect ease of use, like what language is the service in. They can also influence how well it matches user needs in profound ways. There is a really stark example from a study in Indonesia. Planning professionals were apparently highly uncomfortable performing a task involving weight assignment in a tool. The researchers suggested this lack of confidence in their own expertise might stem from the highly hierarchical nature of organizations and work culture there.
So deep cultural norms impacting tool interaction. That's powerful.
Definitely. And you also have technological contextual factors at the macro level, things like general hardware requirements across a region, or even the presence of software bugs can impact functionality, efficiency, and reliability.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. So let's bring it back to you, the listener. You want to be well-informed, cut through the noise. What are the really key takeaways from this deep dive? How should this change how we think about information tools?
I think the biggest shift is this. When you encounter any kind of information tool, especially for complex issues like climate adaptation, don't just look at the tool itself, its features, its interface. You absolutely have to consider the context it exists in.
The organizational setting, the user's background?
Exactly. Because this research strongly suggests that a tool's actual usability is profoundly shaped by these surrounding factors, the organization using it, the individual skills and expectations, even the broader societal landscape.
And recognize that buzzwords like usability or user-friendly might be used but not always clearly defined. So you almost need to become a critical consumer of those terms yourself. Ask the deeper questions. What does relevant actually mean in this specific situation? How is user-friendliness being measured here?
That's a great point. Don't take those labels at face value. Dig into what they mean in practice. And remember that these services aren't static. They exist in a dynamic world. The review highlighted how external factors, like maybe shifting political priorities around climate change, could actually reduce the usability of a service that was previously considered fine.
So usability isn't fixed. It can change based on context.
Absolutely, which encourages us all to think critically, well beyond just the data or the tool itself.
Okay, so wrapping this up. Effective climate services for something like urban pluvial flooding, or really for any complex problem, they demand this much more holistic view of usability. You have to grasp how it's tangled up in this complex web of contextual factors, macro, meso, and micro.
Precisely. And the really dominant thread in that web, as the research show, is the meso level. Those organizational and process factors within and between institutions hold so much sway. If you ignore those often invisible influences, you can end up with incredibly sophisticated, accurate tools.
That just sit on a digital shelf, unused.
Exactly. Or used in ways that aren't really effective.
All right, so here's a final thought to leave you with, something to maybe ponder on your own. The review made this very careful point. The absence of evidence does not mean it is evidence of its absence when talking about these contextual factors. They might be there even if they weren't explicitly studied or reported. So thinking about the information you encounter every day in your job, in the news, anywhere, what other hidden contextual influences might be shaping its usability, its impact, its meaning for you. And maybe what steps could you take in your own deep dives to try and uncover them? Keep digging, keep asking those questions, and keep learning.